sometimes wonder if Mark wasn't giving us a precursor for the first few weeks that a new preacher comes to every church. What are you doing here? You're here to destroy us? I know sometimes people feel that way. They're a little nervous. This is the first story in Mark's gospel. The first thing that Jesus does in Mark's gospel. And that's significant because Mark wants us to know that Jesus is a man of action. He goes to the synagogue and teaches. Mark doesn't tell us what he teaches. In fact, Mark really never does ever tell us what he teaches. And yet Jesus is called rabbi in Mark more than any other gospel. But you have to read the other gospels to find out what he teaches. Mark just says he teaches with authority. His words mean something. I've had the pleasure to be in the ruins of the synagogue in Capernaum. Probably not the same synagogue that Jesus went into, but they'd like to tell you that. So the tour guides, this is the same. It's probably a little smaller than that, but Capernaum's an interesting little town. On the one end you've got the lake, and then there's like one main street, and at the other end is the synagogue, and that's where everyone would go to hear the word, to hear the Torah, and to hear the teachers expound upon it. It was a place where only those who were cleansed could enter. So we're not quite sure how the one with the unclean spirit got in there. And it's a little vague in the text whether he was already there or just kind of bursts in the door. But it's just possible that someone with an unclean spirit could be inside the house of worship. It's possible. And in this nice little sandwich that Mark uses so often in his gospel, and this one's kind of an authority sandwich. You have the teaching, and then this casting out of a demon, and then talk about his teaching again, this authority, and like an Oreo, you gotta eat it all at the same time, so it all kind of mixes together. But in the midst of this teaching, this unclean spirit, this thing that has possessed this person, and it seems like it's a resistance to new teaching or change or holy word, jumps up and comes out of this man and says, "What do you want with us?" Actually, in the Greek, it really says, "What do we have in common?" Just an interesting way to look at that. You are Jesus of Nazareth. That's who he is socially, and within that system, everyone knows this is just a carpenter's son out of Nazareth, and he's a nobody. But we know who you are. We really are Son of the Most High. And that's who he is in reality. On one hand, who are you as a carpenter's son to expound on Torah? You have no training, you have no teaching, you weren't raised to be a rabbi. Who are you to speak? On the other hand, who are you not to speak? Because of who you are. Because of what has been revealed to you. And it's that voice that resists this teaching, that voice that resists this change, breaking into that good traditional Jewish way of being. I had the privilege to go see Fiddler the other night. tradition. And that is so real. When I went to a seminar a few months ago actually now, down in Marshall, it was on what we can learn from other spiritual disciplines to augment our own. And we were talking, the main thing that we really pull out of the Jewish faith is the sense of calendar. Is the whole idea of our liturgical year and how things move in our life with God according to the seasons and the calendar, and how important that is in the Jewish faith, and how important that can be for us as we move through the seasons, through Advent and Epiphany that we're in, and then into Lent and Pentecost and Kingdom Time, and how that affects our life together as a faith community. That tradition that was being threatened by this carpenter's son. I don't know if any of you ever looked at the Scarlet Letter Bible. It's an interesting translation. The way the text reads in that one is that someone got up and said, "Hey, what are you trying to do here? Trying to make us change?" And Jesus, said, "Get out of here!" And he storms out of the building, and everybody goes, "Wow." It really fit literally in that text. It really is somebody that, just up and rails at Jesus. He sends out the Spirit that says, we don't want to hear anything that we're not used to. We don't want to hear anything new or different. We don't want to hear anything that makes us think about changing who we are or what we're about. And yet Jesus works in word and deed to bring newness of life. We're celebrating National Mentoring Sunday today. And those of us who are mentors understand that it might be more about what we do, just showing up every week, than what we say when we're there. The interaction that we have with our mentees is fun and important, but I think in their minds maybe it's more important to just show up. That we just honor that commitment, that there is somebody in their life that's not related to them and for no apparent reason cares about them enough to show up every week and just spend an hour. I think Mark wants us to know very importantly that when Jesus works, he works in word and deed. And maybe if we follow what Mark does in his gospel, which always talks about the actions of Jesus. He did this, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this, and he was a teacher, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this, and he was a teacher, and he did this. We won't tell him what he taught, but we did this, and we tell him what he did, but we don't tell him what we taught. Maybe Mark wants us to think more about action than words. I love the quote given or attributed to St. Francis. We don't really know whether he said it or not. Preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words. Preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words. As people of the book, here's a thought, and it's a scary one. Because we're Protestants. Our whole being is wrapped up in the book and the understanding that we are saved by grace through faith, not by works. That's who we are. Now, as Wesleyans, Wesley couldn't give up works. He just put them in there as the response to God's grace. So maybe we're a little bit that way. But I think Mark wants us to understand that it's what we do that makes the greatest impact. Not for our own salvation necessarily, but for God's saving work in the world. And really, this is kind of an American thing, this personal salvation idea, this whole thing that the whole reason that I am a Christian and accept Christ is so that I can have my eternal reward and that I can be saved. That's kind of an American twist, if you will. Came out of the late 1800s. A close reading of the gospel really understands that it's not really about us. It's not really about our personal salvation as much as it is about God's saving work in creation. About God reconciling the world to himself. And we are agents of that. We are evangelists of that. We tell the good news and show the good news that God is saving all things. And we invite people to join us in that effort of reconciling the world, of casting out those things that would keep us from reconciliation, casting out those evil spirits of hate, of fear, prejudice, and injustice, so that God can reconcile the world to himself. And when we realize that, then maybe we realize too that there are some of us who are in the synagogue with an unclean spirit. Because we have all that stuff going on. We are possessed by so many things in our life. Possessed by the need to move up in our jobs, possessed by the need for more money, possessed by addictions to various and sundry different things. Some of them really bad for us. Some of them are really harmful for our marriages. And some of them really harmful for our physical selves. And you know those addictions. You know those things that draw us away. Those temptations. And we know that each of us in our own way is unclean and possessed by something that prevents us from hearing God's holy word. But remember, Mark makes it clear the first thing that Jesus does is cast those spirits out. Then, so that we can be those people of the word in the deed